r/AskReddit. Doctors of Reddit. What's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Young, 18-20, woman went running into small rural hospital pretending to have abdominal pain. Police officer had tagged her going 40+ km over the limit, which was stunt driving as per the new law in Ontario. Impound and license suspension automatic. Cop followed her into her and apparently said he'd be waiting for her when she left. Locum staff such as myself were housed at a small B&B about 15 minutes away, and the had pre-printed order sets to be done before we arrived. When I arrived, she flat out admitted that she just came in because she freaked out and didn't stop. I told her we'd give her 45 minutes to call her parents' family before I booted her, except BHCG came back positive, and subsequent ultrasound came back showing extremely early ectopic. Officer figures out something is up when he hears air ambulance call coming over radio. She was completely asymptomatic and just worked out that she dodged both charges and a life-threatening issue by accident. It was definitely a WTF moment. Nurse for an ophthalmologist here. Had a 21-year-old new patient claiming to be completely blind from a sudden and severe glaucoma diagnosis from a previous unknown doctor. Would feel around while walking. Tried to keep eyes rolled back into his head. The whole 9 yards. He said he is a famous YouTube rapper that is now unable to make videos or earn a living. I exclaimed to have heard of him before and very excitedly asked him to search and show me his YouTube channel on my phone so that I could subscribe. He took my phone out of my hand and effortlessly found the YouTube app and typed away in the search bar. Oh, and of course his eyes were back to normal and focused. Physical therapist here. Working mom comes into the clinic with her infant in a stroller. She's limping like she's got a nail in her foot, wincing in pain and tears in her eyes. She's crying during her visit with the PT. None of us think she's faking it. She limped out of the clinic. I glanced out of the window and saw this woman bounding down the sidewalk, hips swaying, full stride, going places. We were all fools. Sorta along the same idea. Working at a pharmacy, we saw a guy come in to try and get a refill on some pain meds that had no refill. After pleading that his ear really hurt, we told him again we couldn't refill it. One of the other employees saw his step into a side hallway and take a pencil and jam it forcefully into his ear repeatedly, drawing blood. He calmly left and went to the ear. He came back a few hours later with a prescription for pain meds. This patient comes in for back pain with weakness of the legs. Gets a full workup with MRI, standard blood work, and then some immunological things to look for stuff like myasthenia gravis. No neurological or immunological explanation for the weakness. Patient is seen by physical therapy and they are of the opinion that the patient is holding back intentionally. Go to see the patient at the end of the day and prep them for discharge. Patient is infuriated that they're being discharged, yelling and screaming about how they aren't better, how they are disappointed in the institution, blah blah blah. They said one particular thing that still clearly stands out 3-4 years later. I can't believe you're sending me home already. I haven't even told my family I'm here, and now you're going to send me home before they even have the chance to see me. My attending and I leave the room to arrange things with the nurses. We go back in and the patient is out of bed and standing up in the middle of the room. Miraculously, the patient is able to walk with zero assistance when they had so much difficulty with any assistance over the previous 2 days. At that point, they were enraged. We went into the room without knocking. They were discharged home after a conversation regarding abuse of medical services. One time my roommate, who is an IQ nurse, came to see one of my indoor soccer games. During the game, a player on the other team went down hurt and starting screaming in pain and swearing and rolling around while holding his ankle before he was eventually helped off the field. He then limped over to where the fans sat and watched the rest of the game brooding in silence before he left early. After the game, my roommate told me he was going to go over and see if there was anything he could do to help, until he saw that the guy was limping on the wrong leg. I am a nurse but not a doctor. I had a patient who worked in a hospital, janitor, so he knew enough to fake a bit. He was seeking pain meds, complaining of chest pain, wanting morphine. He was worked up for everything cardiac and was fine. Then he tried to claim GI discomfort when he was being discharged. Cleared again for everything. Faked chest pain again. Cleared again. Now he's my patient. I'm a new face. He's telling me he's having abdominal pain. I call the doctor. Knowing this guy's history, he says he'll be up to see him soon. This patient wants a ginger ale, some stomach ache. I decide to go to lunch. My co-worker comes into the lunchroom. Disgusted, this guy had taken a dump in a basin and then dumped the ginger ale over it and tried to tell her he'd had fecal vomiting. He obviously needed Dilaudid right now for the pain. I walked into his room and sure enough, a pile of shit and a puddle of ginger ale. I told him I'd have to take away his food and drinks and we'd have to put an NG down. Suddenly he changed his tune. He admitted to faking it. Why do these people do what they do? In the story, opioids. Not a doctor, but I'm a UK-based midwife. Had a patient who had been in and out of hospital throughout her pregnancy with episodes of heavy bleeding. This was her 6th baby, so she was a fairly well-known patient in our unit. The issue was no one had ever seen her actively bleeding. She'd call saying that she had bled down the toilet but flushed it, and all the examinations we did came back completely normal with mostly no evidence of any bleed whatsoever. On occasions during speculum examinations we'd see the smallest amount of blood. I was caring for her during a shift where she yet again called to say she was bleeding. Walked into her room and found her jabbing around her vagina with a sharp object to make herself bleed. She had been doing it the entire pregnancy. The reason she gave, because she had 5 noisy children at home, needed some rest and knew we wouldn't admit her to hospital if it wasn't for a good reason. She would do it anytime her being discharged home was mentioned. We ended up having to complete a perinatal mental health referral and consult with the safeguarding midwives as she was putting herself and baby at risk of serious harm. Edit. So this got a lot more attention than I ever expected. There's a lot of questions regarding birth control and questioning her parenting, so thought it best to add an edit. This patient was not by any means a benefits seeker. They were a hard-working and loving family that had full-time jobs. She had been booked in to have her tubes tied but found out a week before the procedure that she was pregnant with this baby. She just couldn't cope during the pregnancy and became very mentally unwell. She did not realize the implications or understand the phase that she was causing massive harm to herself and her baby. She was referred to our perinatal mental health team and treated for psychosis. They also had a lot of input after she had her baby. She ended up having a C-section and was sterilized at the same time at her request. By all accounts she is doing very well now. Also thank you very much for the slivers. Imagine being so exhausted with your family that you feel the need to stab yourself in the vagina. Yikes, I hope that woman found the help she needed. My brother was an EMT for 2 years and he told me this. People will try to use the ambulance as a means for transportation from Fulton to Oswego, because the hospital is in Oswego, by faking seizures. Sometimes when the head EMT guy was feeling fun and knew that the person was faking, he'd say something like, "Man, it's weird that he's having seizures but not peeing himself." Apparently the person would kind of snap out of it for a second, weigh up the repercussions, then either pee themselves or stop faking. I thought that was hilarious. Had a patient when I was an intern feigning blindness. She would constantly be playing on her smartphone, only furiously trying to hide it when someone from the care team came into her room. The best was when my attending one day strolled past her room and threw his hand up in a highly exaggerated hula wave. She started to throw her arm up but caught herself halfway through, then threw her hand back into her lap and pretended to be staring off into nothing. I would never have expected pretending to be blind to be such a commonly faked issue, but reading this thread has changed my mind on that issue. A nurse bringing a patient back to a room who said he had kidney stones. I had him stop at the bathroom and get a urine sample. Dude comes out with the specimen cup that literally has a piece of concrete in it. Looked him in the eye expecting some sort of joke. He was serious. I threw it away and walked his dumbass back to the waiting room to contemplate his stupidity. My next door neighbor would drink a 12-pack of Mountain Dew a day and keep kidney stones year round to get pills. He had a pretty sweet deal too, getting 90 Loricets, 90 Xanax and 90 something else, I forget, every month from his doctor. He just couldn't stop doing other drugs and pissing dirty. I tell this story just because I was impressed with his determination to hurt himself and get surgery once a year just to get high. Like, the absolute determination that takes. My mother is a recovering addict and had been getting the same pills around that time, and I don't recall her intentionally hurting herself. She just went with already messed up issues before she got herself into a clinic to get clean. Edit. Thanks for the gold, man. Who knew talking about my former junkie neighbor would get me gold? If you're reading this, Jerry, you had to know this was about you. Love, your man. Hope you get your shit together. Ophthalmology technician. People pretend to be blind all the time. Go to check their eye pressure with the Tonopin, a device you poke them directly into the eye with, and they go, what the duck is that thing? When I worked family practice admin, the clinic I was working in was in the country and had been passed along through various doctors over the years, starting from about 1960. Holy God. The old tonometer they had looked like something from the Middle Ages, and the general opinion of the clinic was that it doesn't get used anymore. It was like a museum. The previous doc never got rid of anything, so you had drawers filled with metal anoscopes and things. Not a doctor, but I was in the one night and there was a seeking drug addict who literally only acted in pain when there was staff around. You ever see those videos where the little kid is fine and then they spot a parent and then bawl, then immediately stop and be fine when the parent is out of view? Exactly like that. Sat fine. No movements or wincing or noises, then wailing when a nurse was in the same vicinity. Then back to fine when they left. A few weeks ago, I had a vulvar biopsy. I was petrified of this procedure, and I didn't know how to ask the doctor if I'll be given pain meds because of people like this. There is no way to even frame the question without sounding like a drug seeker. I ended up not needing anything at all, but still, figure it's a legit question, but you can't ask it. A patient claimed to have all kinds of illnesses and would cough every minute or so. Have you tried coughing when you don't need to? It's like a normal cough, but you take the subwoofer away. Now imagine that, but 10 times more fake. Guy came to her, I was a nurse at the time, for stomachache. When asking him about history, he randomly mentions a fight with his girlfriend where she left in a tizzy and he fell asleep on the couch. 20 minutes later, when we see the CT, he has a satellite cable remote wrapped in a condom lodged in his rectum. I suppose he intended to frame her. Didn't get to hear the conversation he had with the doctor. I was curious how he was going to explain why she was nice enough to wrap it in the condom. Why would they start with a CT scan? I had a patient when I worked in an ICU that was sedated and on a vent. A family member showed up out of nowhere and was staying day and night. I got pretty suspicious of them because they were clearly lying about knowing this person. Just talked to the fake family member about how it must have been sad since they just celebrated their birthday a week or so before getting ill. This person said it was a wonderful party and such, to which I replied their birthday hadn't occurred yet and wasn't for months. Turned out when security came, it was a homeless person who snuck in and found a room with a sedated patient and decided to make it a place to stay. Needless to say, security to enter the ICU was absolute shit. Years ago, I had a patient who had been rear-ended in an auto accident a few weeks before I saw her. She had a history of lupus. She was decked out in the usual I'm crippled paraphernalia: crutches, neck brace, elbow braces, wrist braces, knee braces, and could barely walk. I saw her a couple of times and she showed no improvement. One Saturday I was on call but had to take a back streets route to the hospital because of an event taking place on the main thoroughfare. I apparently drove through her neighborhood because, wonders behold, there she was wearing old lady spandex, power walking down the sidewalk, holding weights in both hands. I did not call out to her. Next week, she was back in clinic with her I'm crippled get up on again. A few weeks later I got the subpoena for the deposition, and it all became clear. I once saw a patient who had been faking paralysis of the legs for years, used a wheelchair, never walked, etc. Old records showed extensive imaging, neurology consults, and other tests that proved the patient had full function of all extremities. Family friends were just going along with it, not sure if it was really conversion disorder or if the patient had some secondary gain issue. Prison came in with signs and symptoms of a big stroke. At that time the protocol was to get a non-contrast head CT to rule out a bleed and then give TPA, a powerful clot busting drug that's only worth the risk if the benefit is to mitigate a major stroke. So that's what happened. Later in the course he got a little carried away and started embellishing his story with symptoms that didn't make sense with his stroke diagnosis. And that's how we figured out he was faking it just to get some time away from jail. Obligatory, not a doctor. I'm a nurse. We had a guy who had to come in every 3 months to get a medical certificate to say he couldn't work at his retail job due to severe disabling back pain. He was receiving large amounts of insurance money for this condition. After the doctor had done his usual examination and questions and signed it off, the guy asks the doctor to check his shoulder, which doc does, and asks how he injured it. Guy says playing rugby for a competitive team. Really, says doc. How long have you been playing for them? Guy has been playing and training the whole time. Doc puts this info on insurance form. Doc loses his shit in staff room laughing. Next week the patient loses his shit in reception because his insurance has been cancelled. Bro, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.